Luck on Sunday, proudly sponsored by Al Basti Equiworld Dubai.
Well, if ever there was a statement of intent that he was back, it came on New Year's Day when he trained the first three winners at Musselburgh. But that was simply confirmation of an upward curve that had begun at the start of 2019 after a couple of really difficult years professionally and personally for my special guest this morning, Donald McCain. He is very much back in the big time. Horses like Navajo Pass and others will take him to the big spring festivals, but via an appearance on this programme. Donald, good morning.
Morning, Nick. You well?
Very well. It's great to see you. And the important thing is that you and your horses seem to be in really, really good form. How have you found the last few weeks and months?
I think it's been tricky for everyone, but we're very, very lucky to be doing the job we do at the moment and being able to keep going, you know. So we just keep soldiering on.
You've made no secret of the fact that it's been a sequence of ups and downs, really, through the last few years. Do you feel as happy now personally as you have for a long time?
Yeah, life puts manners on you a little bit, Nick, along the way, and it's changed my priorities a little bit, and we're enjoying training nice horses for nice people. And I think not being a very confident person, it makes you realise what you want to be in the job for. And if you can survive something like that, then you might be okay.
It's funny that you say that you're not a very confident person. And certainly when you started training, when you took over the licence from your father, you were always very happy to be interviewed, to talk about the horses. Was that quite an effort for you then? Was that more of an effort than perhaps it felt to people like us who were talking to you and thinking you were kind of full of the joys of spring?
Yeah, people will tell you I'm not particularly sociable in some ways, but I don't find it easy, no, and I think I tend to not get over carried away about things because you're only going to disappoint someone along the way, possibly, you know.
Tell me a little bit about the early days when your father still did have the licence and you'd been away and you'd been assistant to Luca Cumani and you came back. Were you dead set then on this being your life, on this being your career, or was it something that sort of you couldn't get away from?
No, it was always going to be. I decided that what I was going to do, and we never had any real great discussions about anything. Dad said it's time you went away, and I went away, and he said it was time you come back when we were moving, and I came back, and we just soldiered on between us and did the very best we could with what we had. There was never even a discussion about taking over. It just happened, you know. So.
And was the McCain name, and obviously everybody knew your dad and everybody knew the Red Rum story. For you, was that an advantage or not, do you think?
A lot of people had an opinion of Dad, and I think it was the wrong one. He was never bothered, but I used to get quite frustrated that people didn't take him seriously enough. And people said you must have learnt a lot everywhere you went, and I did, obviously. But I still learnt a lot more off my father than I did any of those other yards because we were struggling with ammunition that those people wouldn't even entertain, you know.
So what was it about him and his ability with horses that you've inherited and that you admired so much? What should we have been taking a bit more seriously, do you think?
With very, very limited funds, he was a great buyer of a horse. We were dealing with horses with problems and injuries that most people wouldn't even bother trying to deal with. And when he got his chance at a good horse, he didn't miss very often, to be honest. I mean, obviously Amberley House was the last good horse Dad had, and he went out. I mean, he's the man that came back from Punchestown after seeing him win over either 2 or 2.5 miles and said, "I found a Grand National horse." I would like to think he could train a horse like him to within a couple of days of being ready for the big day.
I mean, and that takes a lot of self-belief. I was lucky enough to interview you and your father and mother and sister all together at your stables, and there can't be many people who had such conviction in his own opinion. Not just about, we all knew that he could be, he could rub people up and sort of do it deliberately and wind people up and whatever, but such conviction in his own opinion on horses, it was quite inspiring to watch sometimes.
Yeah, and he wouldn't be swayed. He was very definite. He didn't really care what people thought, probably to a fault, but we were around him seeing what people thought on occasions, but if he had the right ammunition, he was a great trainer of the right horse.
I really enjoyed watching the two of you together when you were sort of in your early days on the licence, when you were going well in those early days, sort of just before Peddlers Cross and Co came along, and watching you kind of bounce off each other, watching that kind of creative crackle, if you like, was that quite sort of a sort of dynamic environment to be in?
Yeah, he was really enjoying. We were getting to go to the sales and buy horses or buy the ammunition we'd never been able to buy before. And I think he just got great satisfaction from it. We were training for nice people and we were getting to go, and for the first time really, apart from, say, one person asking for a Grand National horse, to go and buy nice young horses that cost a few quid and being able to be judged on what we did.
And this was one such example of a horse who did really well for you around that period. White Oak, she was one of the horses that really started to put the yard into the big time. And you never forget a festival success. And this one must have been very, very special. Your first.
It was my second. Cloudy Lane was my first.
Yes, of course, Cloudy Lane in the Kinmuir.
Yeah. And Cloudy was fantastic. Obviously, Mr. Hemmings sent out a couple of horses towards the end of his career, and I mean, he'd been in a couple of yards before he came to us, and he was just the most wonderful little horse. And to train the first horse for Trevor Hemmings, I think he won his novice hurdle at Haydock, then he won the fixed push final at Haydock, and he won a Grimthorpe, and he won a Kinmuir. He was the most wonderful little racehorse.
Talking of wonderful little racehorses, that picture you've got over your left shoulder there, Donald, is that Chickapeake Ray?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So, tell me about. Yeah. At least I got one thing right. Tell me about Chickapeake Ray, because I've got very fond memories of her, particularly at Carlisle, of those big fences, and she could barely see over the top of them. Would you say that she was a sort of emblem of what you were talking about earlier on, getting the best out of a modestly produced horse?
Well, that was the sort of thing Dad did. He came back from some sale it was a dispersal sale in Worcester somewhere, I think, and he bought 2 full sisters, both by Tenoso. One cost, I think, the 2-year-old cost 550 guineas. And the yearling was nicer and came in afterwards and cost 450 guineas. They were both by a good sire and a good old National Hunt family from many years back. Both windsuckers, I think, standard stuff. And both mares won us a few races. And both mares produced a lot of winners. Actually, the worst race mare produced the best racehorses. Chickapeake Ray was from the good side and won us quite a few races, and she must have been barely 15 hands. And the other side of the family produced Reindeer Dipping and Cholmondeley that were both placed at Aintree festivals.
And in the early days when you had the licence, she was one of those real stars. Chicopee, Ray, and as you say, took you to some big shows as well. When the better horses started coming along and the bigger money started being spent, and I'm talking pre-Rooney's here, I'm talking when the likes of Peddlers Cross were starting to appear. At that point, could you deal with the pressures quite comfortably?
Yeah, I don't suppose I knew any different. I was always very conscious of spending good money on a horse. And we tended to do it ourselves without agents and so on. So the mistake's yours and nobody else's. But I must say we had a good run at it, and we produced some really nice horses quite quickly. So it hadn't seen the other side of it by then, I don't think.
Peddlers Cross was a horse that you had unshakable, unbreakable faith in. Has any horse come close to showing you what he did?
No. He was. I still to this day don't think people realise quite how good he was, Nick. Everybody, and rightly so, goes on about Overturn and what a wonderful racehorse he was, and he was the most fantastic racehorse that turned up all the time. But he couldn't lace the boots of Peddlers Cross.
Tell me what you saw from Peddlers Cross. Try and put some flesh on those bones.
Well, like I say, I'm not a particularly confident person, but we just knew his work was always so good. He won his bumper easily. He won his novice hurdle easily. He went and won a Grade 2 very easily at Haydock on bad ground that he didn't want. And he was doing this despite bad ground. The most eye-catching thing, we did a piece of work with him before the festival in his first year at Bangor. And it wasn't the plan to do it, but it turned into one of those pieces of work that I used to see when I worked for Luca, Cumani and Michael Stoute and so on, where the lead horses were getting used to even try and lead him long enough. And I was going around the inside in the Jeep, and they were going so quick, and Jason was shouting at one horse to go past another and one to go past them, just to lead him long enough. And then he just went past them like they were stood still. When I pulled up, I went to get out the car and I couldn't catch hold of the handle. My hand was shaking that much. And it very nearly made me run him in the Supreme. He was that impressive.
He was such a talented horse. How much did it hurt when he didn't win the champion hurdler? He got so close.
You tried to interview me, didn't you?
Yeah.
And I couldn't speak. Look, I wasn't distraught he didn't win or anything like that, but you could see this second effort he put in after the last when Hurricane Fly went past him, and I found that quite humbling. And truthfully, I don't think he was ever quite the same horse after that for a number of reasons, and it probably not finished him because he won races afterwards, but he was just never the same horse after it, you know.
I remember when he ran it, and I know you do as well because we had words, but he ran in that match against Sprinter Sacre at Kempton, and rather flippantly I sort of said, well, listen, Peddlers Cross is this big and Sprinter Sacre is this big, and he's never likely to beat him again. And you got really angry with me, and I understand now because I understand your total passion for that horse.
You're right.
Well, but that's not why I brought it up. At the time I'm thinking he's being ridiculous because he's run into one of the best horses there's ever been. But when you see how close people get to their stable stars, you begin to have so much more empathy for it,
Well, at the time, we didn't really know with Sprinter Sacre, did we? But I remember I went into the weighing room after racing and Barry Geraghty was there. And he could see I was distraught, I think. But Barry said, I wouldn't panic too much, Donald. This is a flying machine. I said, I don't really care, Barry. It's not. I'm not having it. He said, I'm telling you, this is an absolute aeroplane. And I think my words were, I don't care what it is, nothing should beat Peddlers Cross like that. history's proved different.
You mentioned Overturn. Now, he was a fabulous horse, Overturn. Could you sort of almost go pressure free to all the gigs with him because you just knew that he would just turn up and wear his harness, even if he got beaten, it didn't matter so much, you know?
Well, when I managed to stop getting him beat off about 110, it was wonderful. But the early days weren't sparkling. Yeah, with him, every day was just a joy. He went racing. It's a bit corny, but he just, like you say, always turned up and was quite often the underdog. So there was never anything to lose, truthfully.
I want to talk about your Grand National because whatever happens now, whatever happens for the rest of your career, however many Cheltenham winners you train, if you train another national winner, whatever, the fact is you trained that national winner in your own name after the Red Rum Trio and after Amberley House, with whom you were so inextricably involved. Just how big a deal was that for you?
I probably didn't quite realise at the time. Yeah, I got a wonderful kick out of Amberley House and we were very involved in him, and he was the one good horse we had at the time. Ballabriggs was like a 3-year journey to get him to Aintree, truthfully. And on the day, it didn't quite go to plan. We thought we were going to hang on to him a bit, but he took to the place so well, he was in front most of the way. I didn't quite realise the significance that Dad wouldn't be around much longer. And obviously that adds a huge amount to the whole thing. And yeah, obviously for Dad, for Mr. Hemmings, for me, for everyone involved, it was a long-term plan. Myself and Mick Meager talked about it for years, you know, and it never quite works out like that, does it? You know, you make a plan that far ahead, it just never really works out. And everything we tried to do along the way just worked.
They were wonderful scenes, and it was a very special moment for you. And you make the point there that you obviously didn't realise at the time that your father wouldn't be with us for much longer. And I was sort of reflecting on this when I was thinking about talking to you today, and you saying that you're not the most confident person in the world, you're not the most sociable, you're not that comfortable, pushing yourself out there. When you lost him, aside from it being a great loss for all of you, did you then feel more of a responsibility to step forward because you didn't almost have that sort of protective shield there, that ballast, that sort of swashbuckling figure in the house?
Of course, yeah. I mean, we never used to have big, long family discussions, but any time there was a serious issue and you wanted to talk about it, he was there to talk about it. And conversations never lasted very long. If you thought you're doing the right thing and whatever, that was fine, and he agreed and so on. And we'd have small arguments, but not massive ones. But he was always there in the background if you needed it, And when he went, yes, there was an awful lot of having to do it on your own. There was a little bit of you're not being judged with everything you do. But it was, we had to step up and get on with the job, yeah.
Get on with the job you did. And now you've spoken about the difficulties of that period where you ended up with, quite literally hundreds of horses owned by Paul and Clare Rooney that all disappeared in pretty much in one fell swoop. Were you ever happy with the amount of horses that one owner had in that yard at the time? I mean, how quickly could you sense it getting beyond reasonable control, if you like?
No, I wasn't happy. And for about 12 months before it finished, I was, really unhappy, to be honest. And I don't think it was a very healthy situation. But that's all history now. It was quite often the case that when I bought 3 horses at the sales, it was normally 2 for the owner and 1 for myself. And you couldn't then turn around and say you can't have the cheap one if you've bought the dear ones and stuff like that. And it's very difficult when you're getting the chance to buy the horses you really want to buy to say, no, I don't want another one, truthfully. And I think with the horses I bought. You know, I bought the Last Samurai, and I think he should have won a Grand National. We bought Starchitect, and he very nearly won a Grade 1 for me at Aintree, and obviously he was a great horse for Dave. I even bought a group, myself and Tom Malone went to the Breeze Ups and bought my Dreamboat for 40 grand that won a Group 1 flat race. You know, you were getting to buy the horses you wanted to train, and I'm not in this job for making bundles of money, but just to train nice horses.
And did it unravel over time, or did it unravel very suddenly?
No, it wasn't particularly comfortable for quite a while, Nick, to be honest. I don't want to go over it too much, but there was, like I say, it was about 12 months. The last 12 months was awful, and to be honest, I probably embarrassingly took my eye off one or two other things along the way as well.
Okay, so how did you pick yourself up?
Well, I'm probably a northern. I'm thick enough to get on with it, but the morning after they went, I went and locked myself in the office for 3 or 4 hours, spoke to every owner I had, came out of the office, thought, this job's not too bad, I'm training for some wonderful people, went up the gallop, stood there and thought, come on, sort yourself out, you trained nearly 1,000 winners on this gallop, and just got on with it.
And the journey now to where you are has been really quite a fruitful one. The rebuilding process, dare I say it, almost looks complete. Is that the way you see it, or am I seeing that wrongly?
No, I mean, I'm never going to get... You see, obviously, Pickles, Henderson, Dan Skelton, etc. But I probably haven't got the mentality of those people to train those massive numbers of horses. And if a horse wins half a dozen races for me, I'm not inclined to want to be getting rid of it and move on to the next one quite as quickly. I'm never going to train the numbers I did train. I don't want to train the numbers I did train. And I'm getting great satisfaction now for training for some great people and surrounding myself with great people as well that work for me and stuff, you know.
Yeah, and there's another dimension to this as well, and I know this has been a dimension that's been building for a long time, and that's the success that your daughters are having in the saddle, Abby and Ella. How much does that kind of just shift your perspective a little bit in terms of what you want out of life and of the game?
Well, that's to be honest, when people come and go and your probably circle of friends maybe gets a little bit smaller and stuff like that, and at the end of the day, you've got your close friends, your good owners and so on, and your family. And I was getting great kick out watching the girls. We had great fun when they were pony racing, and obviously John Joe would be there with his lads and Peter Bowen and so on and so on, and it was great fun. And then we moved on to the track, and it was a, should we say, really nice distraction at the time, and made you realise what your priorities should be, truthfully.
And they're both doing well still?
Yeah, Abby's still here. Abby's got a couple of rides on Tuesday at Newcastle and stuff. She rides over jumps. Ella's at Tim Easterby's now as apprentice, and she's tipping away well. Yeah, they're great people to work for. She's in the right place, and they're looking after her really well. I don't think they want to, between Tim and her agent, I don't think they want to waste a claim on the all-weather this winter and concentrate on next summer. I don't know how she'd stay light. She's certainly not got it from me, and it's good.
Well, I think that feels, Donald, like a really nice place to end, with the notion that the flag will be flown brilliantly for the McCain name through generations to come. I really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, and I'm just sorry it's taken me quite so long to get you on the show.
You're okay, Nick. Go good to speak.
Take care. Subscribe to Racing TV to be notified when more Luck on Sunday videos are appearing online. And don't forget to join me for the show every Sunday morning from 9 o'clock with the best guests.